5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So thank you so much for joining us for the last part of this EU annual event focusing on the implementation of the RRP in Malta. I'm really excited to the last panel discussion focusing on SMEs, access to funding and access to other opportunities, not only exclusive to the RRP, but other EU funding programs. As you might be well aware, Malta is currently benefiting from a budget of 2.2 billion euros for this multi-annual framework. So besides RRP and this framework, there are indeed other opportunities and funding programs which we might discuss and hopefully focus on during this panel discussion. Before introducing our next round of speakers for the next 35 minutes, we do have one last Slido question. So please grab your smartphones again. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the words EU funding? EU funding. So, you know the drill by now. Go on slido.com. What is the first thought that comes into your mind when you hear about EU funds? So, it's roads, opportunities, cohesion. Those are the first three. Opportunity. Opportunities. Bureaucracy, improvements, reforms, transitions, planning, investments, red tape. Of course, some of them are linked, red tape and bureaucracy, opportunities and opportunity, green transition. So while around 7 participants are still typing leveraging, reforms, bridging, investments, thresholds, shared goals, interesting, foresight, challenging. So it is indeed challenging, and definitely our next speakers, especially Abigail Mamo, she'll share some insights into how challenging it is sometimes to make use of EU funds and access EU funding. So with that, I'd like to invite Abigail Mamo, CEO of the Malta Chamber of SMEs, to join us on stage. Please, Abigail, lovely to have you on stage. Mary Ann Tembilski from DG Grow. She's the director from DG Grow, but Veronika Tembilski, so I got that wrong. Veronika Towzak-Pleterski, completely wrong, sorry for that.
It's okay, I can help.
Mixed up completely, not even one word there. So thank you so much, Ms. Towzak-Pleterski. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly now. Mr. Claude Samout, Director at the Ministry for EU Affairs, Land and the Economy. It's rather long. Claude, nice seeing you. So I'm seeing Mr. Daniel Borch, the CEO of the Gozo Business Chamber, mentioning insularity earlier on today. Definitely, Daniel will share some insights into double insularity, because doing business, living, and of course, being part of Gozo is, of course, indeed even more challenging. And Denise Fiorentino, CEO of Servizi Europei Malta, commonly known as SAM. And SAM is like a bridge, a gateway to EU funding opportunities. Denise, lovely seeing you as well. On various EU funding opportunities, and Denise definitely will share some insights into that earlier on during this discussion. So to start off this discussion, maybe I can start straight away with you, Denise, if I may, and tell us the types of assistance to get an overview that you provide to local stakeholders when it comes to EU funding.
Well, EU funds come with a baggage. Everybody knows that. Either you love them or you don't. And when it comes to access for SMEs, SMEs are there to focus on their business and not to fill up applications, trying to understand mechanisms. But that is where Sam comes in. We are there as public officers, offering a help desk function to anyone, including SMEs. Anyone who has a query or an idea, or perhaps a need for an investment, however, is not sure what kind of financing facilities are available. In terms of EU funding, obviously, they would come to us and tell us, listen, I have this idea. Is there the potential for EU funds to support my initiative? And that's where our job starts, in the sense that we try and, first of all, understand the concept that the client has. And on the basis of that, direct them towards the appropriate fund. Obviously, when one embarks into a project, it is a journey. So it is meant to be that businesses face challenges or perhaps jargon, which is not understandable to everyone. But we, as SEM, act like the translators so that we try and, first of all, understand the need of the business, whilst at the same time understand the requirements from a regulatory point of view, application point of view, and make both ends meet. So in a nutshell, I would say we'll try to be the bridge between business needs and what EU funds have to offer on the ground.
That's fantastic, put beautifully. So, Ms. Pleterski, if I may ask you, you're director at DG Grow. So I believe your main mission is possibly to help businesses grow in an effective way, pun intended here. In what ways are you helping SMEs, both in Malta and elsewhere in Europe, to do business more efficiently and with less bureaucracy, if I may?
Well, yes, I think I can start just, at the screen, because that's a very good starting point of explaining our agenda in the area of helping SMEs grow and being more competitive. So it has been said already several times, I think this morning, that we are living in a historical time, someone said. So we are in times of transformation, recovery, but going through the recovery to transform also economy in a way that we are going to be competitive and sustainable in the future. So a lot has been said already, I think, this morning about the Next Generation EU, the reforms and available funding that can accompany this transformative change of the SMEs in particular, and also about the opportunities which this agenda, transformative agenda, is offering. Now, to be a little bit more concrete also, how we are looking into these challenges from the EU perspective, I would like to mention that, of course, reforms and investments are the driving force of our process. Reforms are those that have been discussed this morning, but not only. Reforms are also happening at the national level, where you, from Maltese perspective, are trying and are embracing this new transformative agenda. So here, the structural reforms which are needed, I think, are, of course, looking into the business environment, looking into having the right skills, looking into having the labor, looking into having the right technological manufacturing base. So these are all the aspects which are very relevant in terms of transforming our economy of today. Now that, of course, is specifically important from the SMEs perspective. And we have been accompanying SMEs in this journey, I would say, since the beginning. If you just start thinking of the pandemic, which we have faced not so far ago, the first support action was called SURE, which was the action to help SMEs weather this crisis with this temporary support for unemployment throughout the crisis time. Then, beyond that, in terms of restarting the economy, we have, of course, the RRF, but we have also the new multi-annual financial perspective, and I think you have mentioned already there is a significant source available for investments. And here I would like to maybe focus on what is more relevant for the SMEs than for transformation. I would like to draw your attention to cohesion policy funds, which are, I think, significant even for Malta. And in this envelope, we have more than half, 770 million, that are of supportive nature for the SMEs. I'm not going to list all measures, but one of them is also what was mentioned earlier, ESF+. There are measures that are going to transform the SMEs in more digital, more innovation. So this is very important transformative support in terms of investments financing. And then we have also Invest EU, which is a rather new instrument. It encompasses, of course, the financial instruments which were available before, but with this new perspective to support the green and digital transition. And here in the Invest EU envelope, we have again almost a third which is going into the support for the SMEs. We call them, in Brussels jargon, in SME window. But that is all with this objective to support the investments and also crowd in private investment with the support of public investment for the digital and green transition. And the last point I want to add here is not so much about financing, it's also about bureaucracy. I hear it there. And when you think of Brussels, maybe you say, okay, again, these people who are, good example of bureaucracy. But I'm very proud here also to say that we try to understand also these special needs from the SME perspective. And I can mention the recently adopted, we call it SME relief package, where we are specifically looking how to accompany the SME throughout the business cycle, starting with the moment where we in Brussels are drafting our new legislation. We now have committed at the highest level that all the impact assessments, so the assessment of our future proposals, are also going to systematically include the assessment on the impact of these to small and medium-sized enterprises. So in a sort of think first small, and that is really a very, very strong commitment, because what we see is that very often SMEs struggle with compliance because it can be very heavy to follow all these procedural steps, to have maybe sometimes requirements which are more fit to bigger companies. So here, what we hear also from the SMEs, we want to comply. So it's not that SMEs are asking for the exemption for the sake of the exemption. They're there to help us deliver our political agenda. But here we are also trying to give our helping hand, saying we are here to enable you to do this with the more appropriate instruments in a way which is maybe less burdensome for the SMEs. And the last point I want to make here is also that just recently our president announced that we will have so-called SME envoy, and the task of this person will be, which is going to be appointed soon, to really look at these aspects, of our policy making, of our policy development, of our policy deployment, to look at these processes from the SME perspective, and be a sort of, the entry point also for all of you who can express your ideas, initiatives, views, how to look, with a special eye to this SME reality in the single market.
And of course, one of the key targets, if not mistaken, is to reduce red tape by 25%. My question is, how are you going to translate that reduction to helping SMEs access funding more easily?
Yes, I mean, that's, of course, a very ambitious target, I would say, because 25% would apply to our existing legislation and to also what we will produce, but primarily we have already a big, a legislative body now for 30 years building the single market that brings a certain number of legislative, legislative acts. And we are now already at this very moment looking, each service in the Commission family needs to look individually how we are going to adapt, if need be, the existing laws to help member states to deliver on these policy objectives. This, of course, would also involve the access to finance. And here, I think it's not the agenda of one day. We started already in March. We proposed number of, I think, 16 proposals already in March. Now, with the Commission work program, just recently in October, we had another package, but the work continues. I have to really underline that this is a constant effort. So far, I have no concrete answer to your question, but this is also subject to review. And if colleagues in the audience have ideas how we can do this, we are very open also to learn from that, because we have special task force, the high-level committee that is going to look into this. Lastly, I really want to emphasize this point. Since I started my career in the national administration, I want to say that a lot of, red tape comes also from the national level. Like it comes from the EU source, it also comes from the national level. So here, as our president already called on member states, we are also looking out to our member states to help us, and from their end, look at this, potential for reduction of the administrative burden, particularly for SMEs.
So you called on any stakeholders, interested stakeholders, to share their views. Daniel and Abigail, they both represent important bodies in Malta, SMEs, medium and small-sized companies. If we had to ask this same question to your members within the Malta Chamber of SMEs, do you think their thoughts would align with the thoughts our audience shared here today? Or would they be completely different?
Normally, given the audience, I would say that maybe we are preaching to the converted here, so there is a bit of a bias. But surprisingly, I think there would be a very big level of alignment. Our members, we appreciate this because funding is very important for us as an organization, and we understand how important it is for businesses as well. They see the opportunity. So there is interest. They want to look into it. With funding also, there is a clear political direction as well. So there is a sign that these are the kinds of projects that we want to incentivize. This is where we want Malta to move. So these are good projects that we will help you with. So there is a lot of positives that comes with applying for funds. We don't only handle funds, but also we handle local schemes, which are very complementary to the needs of different businesses. But yes, we see a lot of interest in the level of opportunities. Businesses are there to seek out opportunities, and they do this also with funding. But the challenges are there as well. But I must say that the challenges have evolved over time.
Currently, what's the number one challenge?
So I think the number one challenge is a bit the inherent nature of the SMEs. They have very limited time, they have very limited resources, and how much they can focus and devote time on applying and be patient with the application process and the implementation process. There is a structure that they need to follow. So we still have discussions with them of why they need to have a business plan to accompany some schemes and some applications. They tell us, but isn't it obvious that we need this? But obviously, a business plan is there to help you go through the mindset, go through the understanding of how the business will benefit, having your own targets. So there is a bit of frustration when it comes to following certain procedures, compiling paperwork, but it is still a healthy process. The challenges are there in that sense, but we have seen a great level of improvement.
That's good.
So I mentioned, for
in
instance,
what sense, though?
when it comes to how funds are designed, okay, because as rightly pointed out, there is a level of bureaucracy coming from the EU level. And once we have overcome that, and we said, listen, okay, so this we might not be able to do something about immediately. But we always push our representatives to really represent Malta's interests and the realities of SMEs at Brussels level as well. But then we said, together with who drafts the funds, the managing authority, the policymakers, we said, okay, what can we do at our end? And that is where we started to see a lot of flexibility, which helped a real lot. So proportionality being applied. I mentioned, for instance, the need for a business plan for certain schemes and for certain funds. We did arrive to an agreement where under a certain threshold of funding, the capping that you can get, like 10,000, 15,000, making businesses go through the whole hassle of having a fully fledged business plan does not make sense. Let's explain it a bit simpler. So we have seen very good exercises being done of scaling funding and proportionally applying what level of bureaucracy should be attributed to that to make it make sense for businesses. So I think it is a very delicate and balancing act. We do encourage businesses a lot to look into funding. We, similar to SEM, provide a helping hand to businesses. So we understand what projects they have in their mind. We tell them what are the best options. And the beautiful thing is that today there are various ways how businesses can be incentivized, how businesses can apply for incentives. So a business maybe that is cash rich can make a choice. A business who is not, maybe it's a startup or something like that, has to make another choice. And we have these options and help them understand what these options are. Today, funding should be easy enough for most businesses to be able to apply, but there is also experts in the field who can help them, who can guide them, especially in relation to the size of the project, because some projects are quite intense, and obviously you might need to outsource certain help. But I think if I had to tick the boxes of whether it is simple enough, whether it is proportionate, whether someone who is a micro-enterprise can understand the requirements of an application and can contribute and apply successfully, I think we are there. Now we have moved. Is it all rosy? It is not all rosy.
Definitely not.
Now we have moved to another stage where we are trying to push boundaries. So we are trying to see what we have as a country and how we can apply it better for the size of Malta, for the realities of Malta. For instance, state aid rules. For instance, certain specific schemes that we need to work differently. But these do not depend on only our national will. We need to get some green lights from the European Commission, and the local authorities are helping greatly with that. It's very important that we remain flexible, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. So what is good for Malta and what Malta needs is not exactly aligned with that of many other member states. Malta is very particular as a country, and when applying funding rules, we need to be aware of these particularities. And that is where we rely on our representatives in Brussels to really push the message forward.
And the people in the Commission as well.
Yes, to understand us.
So, listening to what you had to say regarding pushing boundaries and a rather optimistic tone about the scenario and whatnot, I don't know, using Abigail's analogy, Daniel, if you're still, because you have a physical boundary, because you have to commute to do business and live in Gozo. If you're still pushing boundaries or if you're witnessing something different when it comes to EU funding in Gozo. I don't know if what Abigail just shared with us, it's similar to your experience of EU funding in Gozo.
Yes, as regards experiences of businesses, they are very similar to what Abigail just described. A point I would like to make, and I would tie up with what Jonathan said in the second panel, is that when it comes to funding, we need not only see what is at a macro level, but we need to go at the micro level. And for example, when it comes to funding, a case in point that comes to mind is, for example, the LEADER program, which is administered through the European Agricultural Rural Development Fund. And this LEADER program, you have a foundation, which is set up in every region, made up of civil society stakeholders, business representatives, and they decide where they would like to go and formulate a strategic plan, which is then followed up with projects. And there we have seen projects which would usually fall through the safety net, which would never have seen the light of day if it was not for these type of funds.
Such as?
Such as, for example, a case that comes to mind is an agritourism project, where a number of services has been done through the LEADER program. It has just been launched, and it's the first one where accommodation is being offered in a rural setting, offering also a number of services. So it is a program which is very much at a micro level because it ties with the needs of the community, the needs of the region. I like to mention a lot this aspect of the community. Obviously, we have the stumbling blocks, and perhaps Gozo has more. Why it has more? Because despite all the efforts that have been, if you see many of the funds that are given to businesses, there is generally that 10% more, which is given to Gozo-based enterprises. But if, for example, it is a scheme which is offered through the de minimis framework, which sets a threshold of 200,000, sometimes that incentives is wiped out. Because despite all the efforts being done by government, if it is offered under the de minimis framework, that business enterprise would have used already its allowance. It's a battle which we have done not only at a local level, but also at an international level, because we have had the presidency of Insular for the past 5 years, which groups the insular chambers of commerce of the European Union. And that of the de minimis framework is something which we have touched upon, because the state aid framework, provides positive incentives for peripheral islands, but does not recognize the needs of islands such as Gozo, which may not be peripheral in that sense, but which have concrete difficulties, and where maybe a higher threshold for the de minimis framework would really help.
Daniel, thank you so much for focusing and mentioning this LEADER program, a very micro initiative. Claude Samut might share with us some macro projects being financed under RRP and also by the cohesion funds under this 2.2 billion euros allocated for Malta under the current multi-annual financial framework.
Rather than the macro projects, I will focus on the schemes, which at the end of the day are what the enterprises can directly apply for. Of course, there are public projects that benefit SMEs and enterprises, but my division mainly handles the schemes where applicants can directly apply, starting with the RRP, which is the main subject of today's event. So, as we've heard, the focus is very much on digitalization and greening, the green transformation. So there we have 2 investment priorities, which we have schemes under. One is digitalization, where we have 3 schemes, also distinguishing on the level of ambition of the projects and the size of the enterprise. For example, we have an ad hoc scheme for micro-enterprises, which makes it with a simpler process to make it easier for micro-enterprises rather than have them compete with larger companies, for example, for the same proposals. So we have 3 schemes there, and we also have a scheme on retrofitting of private sector buildings. And there's a 35 million euros worth of EU money on those RRP schemes. Then when it comes to cohesion policy, we launched our first scheme our first 4 schemes under the new program, the 21-27 program, in June. We're quite proud that we managed to launch them on the following day, where applications closed for the 14-20 program, so there was no break in funding opportunities in terms of EU grants. And this was a first batch. It's not all the schemes under the 21-27 program, but they are select 4 schemes that offer continuation from what we had. So we have a scheme which provides support for business plans. Some of our larger schemes do require a business plan. The smaller ones do not. Also, after discussing with entities like the Chamber of SMEs, we saw that it might not be relevant for all types of projects. So even for the larger projects and applications, the business plan can be supported by us through a separate scheme. And there is also 3 main investment schemes, one for startups, and one, before in the 14-20, we had one for growth, one for diversification. Rather than focusing on the nature of the investment, now the demarcation is the aid regime and the size of the project that one is applying for. So, for example, we had issues that there could be gaps. For example, we had a diversification scheme which was funded under de minimis in the last programming period. So if someone had a diversification project but had exhausted his de minimis allocation, he couldn't apply because the GBER scheme, I'm sorry if I'm getting a bit technical, maybe I can add the parenthesis, de minimis, basically all public support that is given to enterprises needs to be aligned with state aid rules. And primarily, it's 2. One is de minimis, where each undertaking has a threshold of 200,000 euros it can receive over a period of 3 years. And there are the general block exemptions, which cover specific areas. For example, energy efficiency in buildings would be covered under GBER. And there is also the regional aid element, which offers more umbrella type of support. So, but that is not limited to a particular threshold, or where there is a limitation, it's fairly large, usually 15 to 20 million. So it's not a case for us in Malta. So we're differentiating with those. So those that have larger projects and are willing to have more stringent requirements, they can go for the GBER scheme, whether it's a growth project, it's a diversification project, it's an initial investment, or a change in process.
Do you mind asking you the take-up for these schemes you were just mentioning?
They are fairly recent. They have been recently launched in June. So, but for example, for the de minimis scheme, last cutoff, we do monthly cutoffs. The schemes are always open from our end. We operate on an open rolling basis. So the scheme is always open, but every predefined period, we publish the dates in advance. Usually it's 14 days for the smaller schemes, such as business plans, for example, and 1 month for the larger schemes. So in a 1-month period, we received about 15 to 20 applications for one particular scheme. So the take-up is there. It's usually fairly slow till it starts off, but once enterprises and their advisors start getting their head around them, the applications start coming in. So
that's great to hear. Ms. Pleterski, if I had to ask you, assessing the implementation of EU funding programs in Malta, would you consider Malta as being a leader or rather a laggard in this regard?
Well, we just started a new MFF, so that's not maybe for assessment, but talking from work with Malta and experience we have, I have to say that Malta is well on track, which was also quite clear this morning with the RRP. also, I think the fact that Malta managed to make a smooth transition from one MFF to another, this is also, I think, very important fact, because that has ensured the continuity of financing support for the businesses, for other beneficiaries from the EU funds. So these are all, I would say, very, very positive developments. And in terms of cooperation, I have to say we have very good and open exchanges that always helps to also bring reforms, investments in the areas where there is the most need. I want to stress also another very important, I would say, feature which comes out when looking the profile of Malta in terms of using the EU funds is also looking for synergies and complementarities. And I want to give one example which comes from InvestEU, whereby Malta is using this new opportunity, possibility to take cohesion policy funds into the InvestEU financial instrument in order to fertilize the impact power, I would say, of the EU funds. So here, concretely, the cohesion policy funds are going to be used through financial instrument in the InvestEU context to support the financing of the SMEs. I understand there will be loan and debt availabilities, possibilities for the SMEs. And that is very, very important because from our perspective, using these synergetic and effects between different EU funds is critical in this, as we say, transformative times, because money is scarce and we need to really place it smartly. So this is very good. Well, there are always, things that we can improve. We have heard this morning there are still, policy requests for directing money more into innovation, digitalization, but I think this is very much already, on the radar screen of the Maltese authorities. I want to end by saying also, for us, what is very important is also the exchange that we can have with the stakeholders. And this, I am really grateful to Malta, because here I think we have a great opportunity also to inform our policy financing agenda through understanding better the concerns, ideas, proposals from the stakeholder community.
And that's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much, Ms. Platelski. Ms. Fiorentino, you mentioned earlier that you go on these journeys with clients, SMEs, in supporting them with whatever they need. Is there something you cannot do for them and somehow you don't meet their expectations? So if we have business owners watching this conference today, something that they should completely avoid when approaching you?
Well, first of all, I think the first part that anyone trying to access EU funds should do is plan. Plan what they need, and also have clarity of thought in terms of the co-financing element which may be required. Obviously, this depends on the program. So the first thing is to have, obviously, a clear idea of what they want to do, what they wish to achieve, whether they have the financial capacity, and also the human capital to manage the project.
So Denise, allow me to ask Abigail, do you think your members have this capacity to, or level of maturity enough, following their funding experience, to plan ahead rather than going to SEM or other organizations and apply for funding? What's your take on it?
I think they have limited patience in terms of, once they are convinced they want to do a project, they want to do it now. Yes. So going through the process, even though even the adjudication has become much quicker, they just get a bit frustrated. But that is why also funding is important, because it helps us create conversations to start them on that journey. Now, how that journey will finish, whether they will get funds for it or whatever schemes they will use, this is another story. At the end of the day, it's important that they do the project, but not all businesses can afford that. Some businesses, and I would say it's more the majority rather than the minority, they would understand that they need to wait and that there is a process involved, and the wait is important so that they gain the grants or that they get the benefits of the scheme. Now businesses have been touching with funding for a number of years, and we actually insist with them, listen, check out the new funds, even if you have previous experience, because they were very bureaucratic, they were very difficult to access. Now the experience has improved greatly. So we want them to try it again, to have another go at it. So businesses come with the understanding that, listen, if you want funds, it's not just like this. They won't give you 50,000 euros on the table to spend as you like. There is a process. Now, how many of them have the capacity to actually handle a project? I think in most cases there might be, in other cases
Denise,
maybe...
you might want to add something on this.
Yes, basically two things actually. First of all, in terms of planning, what we emphasize with anyone who approaches us, listen, apart from what Abigail was mentioning earlier, when you do a request to any bank, financial institution, you would need to prepare yourself. And EU funds requires the same kind of approach. Now, the extent of the paperwork, the extent of the documentation, I cannot say whether it is the same or not, but I believe both come with their own set of niceties. But in the case of EU funds, we have the opportunity that Sam is there, that any queries which arise along the way, we are there to assist. So be it something which is not understandable enough, be it something which we don't know how to phrase it within the EU jargon framework, there is an entity that is there to provide a personalized service, to understand the need, and try as much as possible to translate it in the application process. We are public officers, so we are duty-bound to address queries coming from anyone, including businesses, and that's why we are there. I'm not saying that is a walk in the park, but I'm saying that they are not walking it alone. And then I'm saying that rather than sending entities here and there, they have just one point of reference. They can come by or drop us an email or call us, physical meetings, online meetings, call whatever they like, and we walk this journey through them.
And it's free of charge.
Sorry?
It's free of charge.
Yes, it is. Compliments of...
Completely free.
So that is at application stage. Then, if the project is selected, we also provide our help desk and offer support in terms of implementation. So any stumbling blocks or concerns or perhaps reporting obligations which is unclear, again, they can call us. If we have the answer there and then, we reply. If not, we liaise with our counterparts and get back to them accordingly. The idea is to, as much as possible, make businesses focus on their business, and for us to give them the information they require with the least possible, how would I say, hurdle. But again, EU funds come with a baggage. Some of it we can address, some of it we cannot. But what we're trying to do is iron out as much as possible that kind of process.
Daniel, very briefly, do you have any statistics of how many gazetted-based enterprises have benefited from any sort of EU funding over the years? Or?
No, in that case, I do not have access to the type of statistics, but it is something, when reflecting upon it, that we need to delve on. I said, much of the difficulties that we are faced, and it is not only us, but also comes from the policy formulation aspect, in the sense that if we would have that type of analysis where we know what are businesses in Gozo doing, what things they are finding difficult, what is facilitating them. Okay, we get feedback on the ground when we work on them. Sometimes it is the bureaucracy, the red tape. As Abigail mentioned, things have improved very much. But if we would have that type of analysis, I think certain funds could be tweaked more to the regional level. Because I think the regional level, it's something that we must not forget. Today, for example, we are talking about the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And there are certain schemes which are discriminate positively towards Gozo, like the scrappage scheme. But for example, a business in Gozo, if it wants to shift its commercial vehicle to an electric one, he has to make a significant capital investment because the electricity infrastructure currently does not permit it. So I think this is a shift, this is a relationship between the micro and the macro that we always need to keep in mind. And that analysis that you mentioned, that for example, we need an analysis of how are businesses in Gozo doing with EU funding, that would help in the policy formulation side when we come to see how we can tweak, like we did, certain incentives to make them more, create more an appetite for businesses to delve into these type of funds.
Daniel, I wanted to ask you about climate neutrality, because for all those attending here and watching this conference, Gozo has been named as one of the 100 European cities to become climate neutral by 2030.
Yes.
What it means for you as Gozo Business Chamber and for the businesses in Gozo?
It means a lot. It means a lot. It's something that we have also as a chamber worked on it. Obviously, there are certain hurdles that need to be overcome. One is the energy of the island, where it comes from, the transport. Still, we have, for example, ferries which have a high pollution rate. And we know how much the ferries are used between the two islands. We need to shift to the electric mobility. We also have made suggestions as a chamber on how we can shift the public transport to have more frequent public transport, because Gozo is very small. And as a chamber, we believe that Gozo can set the pace for the whole of Malta, for the whole nation, because you can introduce certain reforms on the island which you can implement at a national level. So we are saying have smaller buses, but more frequent. That will increase the uptake of public transport on the island. Because an important element, for example, of the Gozotan economy is the day tours that visit Gozo. But the challenges are significant. And I believe that this program, like the Recovery and Resilience Facility, can
is
help.
certainly supporting you in this transition.
Yes, definitely.
In what ways? Any examples that come to mind?
For example, I mentioned the electric mobility aspect. The Recovery and Resilience Facility is working also on the electricity grid, because despite all the incentives that we can give for people to shift to electric cars, and in Gozo those incentives are better, I think 1,000 euros more on each category of scrappage vehicles. Currently, the electricity infrastructure does not support it, but we know that that certain investment which is tied to the Recovery and Resilience Facility will be dedicated to that. Obviously, I would also like certain types of investment, like, for example, that you mentioned, the offshore wind farming. In Gozo, I think Gozo can be the first experiment where it can be completely energy independent on and focused only on the renewables. And I always say, let's dare to dream, and let's dare to be visionary also as important stakeholders within the community.
Thank you so much. Daniel Borch, CEO of the Gozo Business Chamber, Abigail Mamo, CEO of the Malta Chamber of SMEs, Denise Fiorentino, CEO of Servizi Europei Malta, Claude Samut. I had a couple of questions to ask you, possibly very briefly. What one key recommendation would you give to business owners in Malta to tap all the possibilities and opportunities when it comes to EU funding?
First and foremost, I think I will latch on to what Denise said. You need to know what you want to do and what you want to achieve. Start from there. And then I think there is sufficient help to guide you, whether it's or your private advisors. And because we are not exclusive in this, we are part of a system of funding opportunities. There are the InvestEU financial instruments. Maybe a loan would suit your needs better. There are also national funds. So decide what you want to do, what is best, and get help for what you need to do and how to develop your business. Then the funding idea should come at a later stage. Not there's funding, what can I do to get it? So decide what you want to do, then seek the best funding source for it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Claude Samut. Thank you so much to Ms. Topsak Platersky from DG GROW, from the European Commission. Thanks to all of you for being with us for this remarkable annual event organized by the European Commission representation in collaboration with the Ministry for EU Funds, Economy and Lands. Of course, many key takeaways from the speakers we had with us, but feel free to keep on reaching out to the European Commission representation in Malta or to any other speakers we had with us today. And don't be afraid, if I may just give you one tip, don't be afraid to ask questions. So with that, thank you so much and wish you a fantastic day.